Hello, my name is Sue Walker, and I want to talk to you today about the effect of verbal speech on morale. My background is in special education and mental health counseling, and I'm going to be pulling on my experience on this, plus all the scientific evidence that's come out lately, just in the last few years. When I first moved here, I got a job supervising classes for the Stark County Board of Mental Retardation. Now, we served children whose IQs were less than 50. So our concentration was on behavior and on self-help skills. So we were designing an in-service for our staff about behavior modification and conducted by our Akron U professor. And there was nothing new about behavior mod. It was been around since the mid-90s. But this approach was using verbalization, which speeded up the process quite a bit. With behavior modification, you teach people through experience what effect this particular behavior has on their life. So, just about the time we were doing this, we got a call from public school, and it's always so funny to see how timing works out. The public school dealt with children whose IQs were higher and were considered educable. And this particular boy was in a class of teenagers, and he had a behavior that was upsetting the whole class. He obsessively talked about vampires, and no one could get anything done. So we got him. So the class where he was going to be going was a small class of teenagers. The teacher was superb. He had those kids so convinced that they could behave in a mature way, and they really took pride in that. So it was easy for me to go in and say, guys, we're going to get a new kid. He's coming in here. He's a nice guy, but he does something that's really drives people up a wall. He talks about vampires all day long. You can't get anything done. So what I'm going to ask you to do is when he starts talking to you about a vampire, you don't say anything to him, you don't fuss at him. All you do is pretend like he's invisible. Turn your back on him so he's talking to the back of your head. So, then Tony came, and sure enough, he was obsessive to the nth degree. And we started working with him. Now, in this approach to behavior modification, we taught the person, we didn't tell the person what they were doing wrong. So our next step was to work with Tony. He was a likable kid. So within a few days, we had taught Tony how to verbally tell us what behavior was going on that was getting him into trouble. So it went like this. So Tony, what's going on with you? What's getting you into trouble? Well, they say I talk about vampires too much. Oh, do you? I guess so. Well, what happens when you do talk about vampires? Well, the kids turn their back on me. They don't even say anything to me. Wow, I bet that hurts, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, what happens when you're not talking about vampires? Well, they're real nice. They're nice kids. They treat me real good. Well, Tony, what do you think that's telling you about how you should act? Well, I guess I should stop talking about vampires. It sounds like a plan to me. Within a week or two, we had taken over this behavior that had caused a complete disruption in the classroom. And after that, not too long ago, with science able to image the brain, they have been able to demonstrate that verbalization had effect on neural development. A positive verbal speech, positive verbal speech, actually enhances neuron developments. Negative speech helps dry them up. There's a book called Who's White My Brain by Carolyn Leaf that demonstrates this. It's an easy read and very informative. So, I don't know about you, but I need all the neurons I can get. So, what I'm going to do now is we're going to talk about just 4 different verbalizations here. We're going to talk about asking for something, making a request, reacting to negative criticism, and letting people know how we feel about a situation, and giving affirmation. So, we'll talk about making a request. Unfortunately, human nature is such that we often jump to negative conclusions too fast. And this causes us to get defensive and passive aggressive. Not pretty. So when we're making a request, if we get the idea that we're not going to be, it's not going to be listened to, it is not going to be acted on, we immediately go to some pretty tacky behavior. I'm going to give you some examples of this. Here we have a husband and wife on a cold winter day out Christmas shopping. They have walked, they have spent too much money, they're cold, they're tired, they're hungry. And the wife says, I am so tired and I am hungry. I know you wouldn't buy me anything to eat. You expect me to go home and cook supper now. That's going to be taken in beautifully, isn't it? Even if he does take her out to eat, it's not going to be pleasant. So instead, she could have said, you know, I am really tired, and I know you are too. And I think it would be a good idea for us to stop on the way home and pick up some Chinese. And then we can sit in front of the fireplace and eat and relax. That sounds pretty pleasant to me and would set up for a pleasant evening. We have a young man coming home from work to a tired mother and screaming children. He says, good grief, can't I take my hat off before you bombard me with, you just wait till your father comes home. I wish I'd gone out with the guys to have a drink. I had a hard day too. Could we say, oh, honey, let me get my hat off. I'd come over here and give me a hug. I want to be glad I'm home. And then we'll take care of whatever is happening here. We'll do it together, okay? Sounds good to me. This is dealing with criticism. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of thing that's trying to improve you. I'm just talking about some pretty hostile kind of verbal behavior that people do sometimes. I was working with a client, a couple who were having some problems, and I was talking to the husband by himself, and he said, my wife is so darn critical, and I'm getting really, really tired of it. And so we worked on that, and on my way home, I had to stop and get some gas at a little country gas station, and I paused, went to the pump, got my gas, went in to pay for it, and this young man came in, and he practically snarled at me. "Well, lady, you'd better watch that cute little car of yours. You stopped right in front of me, and if I hadn't been watching, I would have ran right into that car." And I thought, oh, this timing is hilarious. Don't you know I've been talking about criticism? So I said, oh my goodness. Oh, my husband just got me this car, and I would just hate to have it busted out. Thank you so much for being so alert, and I'll watch it in the future. Well, all the eyes went off of me to see how I was going to react, and they all went back on him. And he stood there looking kind of foolish and said, "Well, I was just kidding." And I thought, sure you were, buddy. But anyway, this is the good way to do with a criticism that's unnecessary. But never, never agree with the criticism that is not true. Okay? So, the first thing I'm going to say is this husband says, "This soup is lousy. It's tepid." And the wife says, "You know, you're right. Let me heat it. Does it need more salt?" What about this? This man says, "You know what? You're trying to put us in this. Look at this grocery bill. Are you trying to put us in the poorhouse?" And the wife says, "Look, I'm sorry. I won't accept that. I'm a careful shopper. I do my best to keep food prices down, but it's expensive. Why don't you come shopping with me Saturday? And you can see for yourself what we go through." So, this sort of gives you an example of how to deal with diffusing a criticism that's obviously not meant for your good. Just agree with it, if at all possible. The next thing I'm going to talk about is iMessages. An iMessage is simply a way for you to express your feelings about something that's happening. You do not criticize, and you do not demand something. All it is that you're sharing your feelings. That's the only thing you have responsibility for, is your feelings. And they will have to take care of it, whatever they see. Now, this is a very good way to avoid stuffing feelings, not expressing anger directly, but expressing it later with some passive-aggressive behavior or body language. So it's a very important thing. And I'm going to give an example from my counseling for this. I was working with a lady whose husband manipulated her quite a bit through his physical symptoms. And anytime anything was coming up that was important to her, he would get a symptom, the doctor would send him to the hospital, and just long enough to mess it up. And it was interfering with their relationship. She was getting pretty hostile. So I talked to her about the iMessage, and she said, "I don't know that I can do that." And I said, "Well, what we'll do is practice, and then I want you to write a little note to him and tell him how you feel, and give it to him, and sit there and listen and see, and discuss it with him if he'd like to talk about it." She said, "Well, I could do that." So when she came back, she said, "I don't know why in the world I didn't do this a long time ago." My gosh, when I talked to him about this, I said, "Okay, honey, I want to tell you something. I don't know whether you realize it or not, but when I'm going to go somewhere or do something important, it must set up some anxiety in you. And you end up with a symptom, the doctor sends you to the hospital, They do some tests. Nothing. You come home just long enough to mess me out. You need to know that this is bothering me more and more. I'm getting pretty sick of it, pretty hot. So what you do about it is up to you. He didn't want to discuss it. I left on my little trip for the wedding, and when I came back, good grief, he had listened to PBS on how to paint a landscape, gone out and gotten a canvas, the oil paints, and painted this blue landscape. He had gotten some lawn furniture. He had all my artwork around displayed for my sister to see. I thought, why in the world didn't I do this a long time ago? Now, you notice that I didn't demand, that she did not demand, that she did not criticize. She simply told him what was happening and her reaction to it. I need to tell you this about iMessage. It can be a very powerful way of giving a positive message. Now, this is an example. This young husband at breakfast time tells his wife, you know, Jennifer, this last night we're at the Parkers, when you bragged on me about the boss liking my proposal and giving me more affirmation, you know, it made me feel like $1 million. I want to thank you for that. That's pretty nice, isn't it? What if a young lady says to her husband, you know, John, when we're in a crowd and you make fun of my family, I feel very demeaned. You have to know this. What about this? We have a little teenager, and the mother said, Johnny, your father and I work very hard, both of us. And it really bothers me very much when you don't pick up your dirty clothes and when you leave dirty dishes in the living room. I feel like you don't appreciate us very much, and I'd like for you to take care of that. What about this little girl who says, Mom, when you call me that silly baby name in front of my friends, it makes me feel bad. They tease me about it. It's just a good way to share our feelings in a way that is not punishing and not demeaning. So, it's healthy. Okay, we've talked about asking for things properly, giving an iMessage, responding to criticism, and that's cleared the way for us to talk about, to be the most important thing, and that's affirmation. Affirmation is noticing something about someone and edifying this person for no reason, not for any reason at all, except you're sharing something very positive with this person about themselves. And it's very powerful. I learned this lesson very, very deeply when I was in Bogota, Colombia. I went there after my husband died, and I was teaching a first grade class. And these children had been in the jungle, when in a town in the jungle, and were chased off by the drug cartel. And it was a dangerous place to live. And I wanted to accentuate the positive, as they say, as much as possible. So, the first thing we had a situation here, and I'm going to share some sketches of these kids. These little boys you see is what you get with boys. They're delightful. Girls are a little more subtle with their relationships. And these girls look so sweet, don't they? But one of the girls had a lot of leadership ability, and she had these kids clustered about her, and they were shunning one little girl, and it broke her heart. So we had to deal with this, but I didn't want to disrupt this leadership this girl had. So what we did, I got hold of some of this teaching just in the nick of time. So what we did was I assigned a secret friend to the kids every week. And I did the assigning. And they had a different friend every week. And what they were supposed to do was to watch this person and come up with at least three things that were positive, that you liked about them. And then we did some teaching on how to give a compliment. That a compliment had to be true, and a compliment had to be true and to be affirming. So, the next thing I did was, after I'd signed the class, on Friday afternoon, I made a big bowl of popcorn, and the kids would dictate their letter to their secret friend. And we'd read these letters, and they were a howl, really. Another thing I did, it did break up that shunning thing. Another thing I did was teach kids how to give a good compliment. And I'll give you an example of that. There was one little boy in the class. He was just adorable, but he had a motor going in him that was 90 miles an hour. Sitting in his seat was rough for him. So I was teaching, we have our counseling tutorings, and I was telling him the things I liked about him. And I said, you are to stay in your seat so much better. I'm so proud of you. I know it's hard for you too. And your artwork is beautiful. It is lovely. And you have such a nice smile. Now, I want you to give me a compliment. And he thought, and a little too long, I think, and thought, and finally he said, you're cute. Well, I was 71 then. You'd think I wasn't, if I didn't remember that compliment. One little boy told me he liked my curly gray hair and the way my glasses made my eyes look so big. But I think the person that learned the most from all this was me. And I saw the terrific effect of passing on positive feelings to people. What does it hurt when you go into a grocery store and you're in the checkout counter and there's a lady in one of those chairs that you have to scoot around in? What does it hurt to say, you know, that color is really good for you. It looks very nice. Mm-hmm. It's good for you and it's good for her. And then too, when we go back and listen to this, think about it, we're enhancing our mental capacity. We're keeping stress down at a low level, which is helpful for our blood pressure, goodness knows. And it's just an important way to live. And besides, ladies, when you smile a lot, it really helps sagging facial muscles.